Welcome everyone to Numerical Gems. Today I would like to discuss what is Kabbalah and what can we learn from what the word actually means and its numerical value. So first of all, the word Kabbalah, the simple understanding is to receive, lekabel, which means the received mystical tradition. Now, referring to the Jewish mystical tradition as Kabbalah is actually only about 1,000 years old. Before then, there were many other terms that were used in order to express the Jewish mystical tradition. Some were Ma'aseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot, or Ma'aseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, or Torah Nistar, the hidden Torah, or Torah Tachen, the Torah of the Chachma Nistar, of hidden wisdom. But in the last 1,000 years, the name Kabbalah has kind of stuck to the mystical tradition. In the time of the Talmud, Kabbalah was used, but more for the normative traditions that were handed down orally, going back literally thousands of years. So Kabbalah means to receive. But we see that in the Torah itself, the root word of Kabbalah only appears 3 times, and never in the context of to receive, but in a different meaning of the same root. Lekabel means to make correspondences, to match up 2 different ideas and correspond them. Lahakbil. And where we see this is in the making of the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. And part of those instructions were that there were curtains that surrounded the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and they were sets of curtains, 2 sets. And one set, the instructions were to put 50 loops on one side and 50 loops on the other side. And then to take golden hooks and to put a hook between each of the 50 loops. And so in the Torah, that's called makbilot halulaot, that the loops were made to correspond one to the other. Now, the number 50 is highly significant because we have this idea of 50 gates of understanding. And so here we have 2 sets of 50 and we're putting them together. And so just as an example, anyone who's put on a shirt or a blouse very quickly in the morning and is not really looking at what they're doing, and then they look in the mirror and it turns out that they didn't put the buttons in the right loops, and you can obviously see it's not corresponding correctly. So in the Mishkan, the act of making correspondences is the root lekabel, lahakbil. And so Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg explains that this is the actual meaning and purpose of the Jewish mystical tradition, is to become sensitive and have a refined consciousness to be able to make correspondences between different ideas, different realities. And the end of this whole idea of putting the curtains together, it says, V'haya ha-mishkan echad. When the curtains were put together, then they surrounded the tabernacle, it says, V'haya Mishkan Echad, and the Mishkan became one. So Rabbi Ginsburg teaches that that is the idea of making correspondences, is to see how ultimately everything is one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. But it doesn't mean just that God is one, that there's one God. It means ultimately that everything is part of that oneness. And so Kabbalah is the type of consciousness where we take a pluralistic world, a dualistic world, a bipolar world, and we see the oneness behind everything that's uniting everything. That's the ultimate purpose of Kabbalah. But now let's look at the gematria of Kabbalah is 137. And a further teaching from Rabbi Ginsburg is that this 137 can be seen to be addition of two different words that will equal 137. And these two words tell us the inner dynamics of the consciousness of Kabbalah. The first one is the word chachma, wisdom. Wisdom, chachma equals 73. And the other word is nevuah, prophecy, equals 64. 64 and 73 equals 137. But what is this teaching? What are we being taught here? That Kabbalah, we think of it as our mystical tradition. So therefore it's very spiritual. It's very elevating. It's very, very high, transcendent notions. But at the same time, for those who really understand Kabbalah, it's actually very intellectual, it's very organized, it's very clear, it's very logical. That's one strand of Kabbalah. Logical, intellectual, orderly, and at the same time, nevuah, which equals 64, is prophecy. And this tells us that the wisdom of Kabbalah is not just intellectual, is not just logical, but it transcends only logic, and it gets us in touch with a higher spiritual reality behind all physical material reality. And it leads us to spiritual and even at times prophetic experiences. And so we have these two seemingly opposite trends or dimensions or dynamics of Kabbalah, but they're both true simultaneously. They're not at odds with each other. Prophetic experience, spiritual experience, and logic and intellectual pursuit are really two sides of the same coin. Now, just a little bit further is Chachma. It's one of the Sfirot, and it's on the right side of the Sfirot. On the right side of the Sfirot is Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. Wisdom, loving kindness, and eternity. On the other side is Bina, Gevura, and Hod. Understanding, power, and glory. So 64, Chachma is one of the Sfirot, 73. 64, we said, means Nevuah. And in adding 64 and 73, you get 137 equals Kabbalah. But 64 is also the numerical value of Din. Din means judgment. And judgment is always connected to the sphere of Gevura, which is on the left side. So here you see that the two strands or themes or experiences of Kabbalah unite the right and the left. In other words, the dualities of this world are united in the consciousness of Kabbalah. And so that's just a beautiful understanding of how we take opposites and we make a correspondence between Nevuah, prophecy, and wisdom, which we think of as intellectual. And we put them together into one consciousness called Kabbalah.